Well, it's reported that Muslim hate preacher Anjem Chowdhury is still being held by police after he was arrested yesterday morning. According to reports, detectives raided the 56-year-old Chowdhury's home in Ilford about 5:40 a.m. on Monday. Scotland Yard counter-terrorism officers arrested a second man, a Canadian national, 28 years old, who landed at Heathrow on a flight from Canada 7 hours later. Both men were held on suspicion of being members of a banned organisation in contravention of the Terrorism Act 2000. The pair were being quizzed at a West London police station as police searched 3 properties in East London. That is the latest, of course. Any more we will bring to you as we get it. But that news broke on the day that Suella Braverman revealed that Islamic terrorism is still a major threat to Britain. The Home Secretary also warned that Russia is also using terrorism to sow division in the UK as she laid out the government's new counter-terror strategy. Joining me now is Kevin Hurley, former head of counter-terrorism at City of London Police. Kevin, thank you very, very much. So Suella Braverman outlining the new counter-terrorism strategy, basically saying that the greatest threat does still come from Islamist terrorists. What do you make of it?
Well, she's absolutely right. I mean, we woke up to the world once the Twin Towers came down, and those people who work in the counter-terrorist world have never looked back, quite honestly. There's absolutely no doubt that there remains a threat to us in the UK, mainly from our own homegrown people. You know, it's nothing to do with people coming over on the illegal boats and so on, although there might be the odd person there. But the bottom line is our own British children, for various reasons, are getting radicalised online, or in terms of Islamist terrorism, in extremist mosques that preach Salafist extreme jihadist behaviour. And this will pertain, frankly, I can't see any end to it. It's going to carry on, and it's good that government are focused. And what I'm particularly pleased about is to see Mr. Chowdhury yet alone getting arrested, as he probably does, as he did before, which is live off our social benefits.
Well, there we go. I'm just going to say now, so this counter-terrorism strategy is called Contest, and as you were alluding to there, Suella Braverman has identified the fact that in prisons, she believes that there is a massive issue when it comes to radicalisation. She also identified the online world, and also has been talking as well about the threat that Russia poses when it comes to terrorism. And I just wondered if what you made of that. I mean, you know, look, Russia is obviously deemed to be a kind of bad actor in the world, but I'm not sure I would necessarily associate that with terrorism on the streets of Britain.
Well, the thing is about the Russians and Putin and his team, they come from a long heritage with the KGB about being disruptive and using what might be known as asymmetric warfare techniques, which is using other ways to cause countries issues or problems. And, of course, at the moment, we are number one subject of dislike by Mr. Putin because of the way in which the government has supported the Ukrainians to hold the Russians off. So some ways to hurt us are to stir up trouble and dissent within the UK, particularly amongst Islamists who are likely to swallow the jihadist nutcase side of life. And when you bear in mind that he's got a lot of Chechens in his armed forces, that Chechen army, who are now his tame Islamist fighters, they've got plenty of knowledge and plenty of extremists there, quite able to use online means to propagate what he wants to do, which is disrupt our society so that we don't provide the weapons that the Ukrainians need to defeat him.
Yeah, now, this is interesting from Suella Braverman, OK, which is counter-terrorism policing has around 800 live investigations and last year made 169 arrests for terror-related offences. She went on to say 2 terror plots have been foiled in the past 7 months alone. I mean, for want of a better phrase, it is a ticking time bomb here, isn't it?
It is, and I'm surprised they're only saying 2 foiled in the last 7 months, because, you know, there are several thousand people that are people of concern to the security forces, mainly the police and MI5, And amongst any of those is someone who is likely to go off the rails. If you look at most of our own homegrown terrorists, they've got a couple of things in common. Quite honestly, they've got personal issues and problems about how they see the world. They tend to be insecure young males with too much testosterone who want to demonstrate, that they are someone to be heard and to be listened to. And a lot of them, and this is why prisons are important, a lot of them have got a history of failed lives in that they've been to prison on a number of occasions. The Peckham mugger, if you like, the shoe bomber, Richard Reed, who tried to bring down the airliner, was a classic example of that. Went to the Brixton Mosque, was a street robber, known to a lot of us, who ended up going down that route. And of course, in the prisons, we got real problems now where they are running some of the wings and causing prison staff a lot of problems in trying to manage them.
Yeah, look, let's be completely honest about it. A lot of these people who want to be terrorists are actually very sad little men who quite often can't get a girlfriend or a wife, and if they can, to be honest with you, I wouldn't necessarily be that pleased with what I've got. And then you look at them now, they can't really potentially get a job because they might already have a criminal record, and they think life is hopeless, and they want to try and be some kind of hero in their own homes. They are just pathetic. Unfortunately, though, some of those pathetic people do kill people on the streets of Britain, and that, of course, is an absolute nightmare. Suella Braverman does talk a lot about the proliferation of modern technology online and how difficult it is to keep tabs on that. This will be a fine balancing act because the average Joe on the street who just uses one of these things, a phone or a laptop here that I've got here, for nothing nefarious whatsoever, we don't want to end up having huge amount of restrictions on what we can and can't do and huge amount of these, online safety bills, which are derived around protecting against the lowest common denominator, aren't they? Your kind of evil people who go out there and seek out your handy material. So it's a delicate balancing act between clamping down on those people and upholding basic public freedoms.
Well, I think you make a very good point. But I think one area where the police in particular, because MI5, of course, take a lower profile, could do far better is being much, much more agile around the use of social media in relation to any particular event. The police generally in the UK are woefully poor at responding to any story that's negative or unhelpful. And I would like to see a situation where the police in UK, as a matter of policy, across the board, but including terrorism, have got teams of people constantly monitoring what's going on and developing counter-narratives on Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, a whole lot of them that kids follow because one thing I learned when I was out in Afghanistan, I was a senior police advisor out there advising on the Taliban, is they were streets ahead of the entire NATO effort at using social media. Yeah. They would set us up constantly and spread the word so that millions of people in Afghanistan thought that we were up to bad stuff, and it would take days before we'd react. And the UK police are actually no different at getting out a different counter-narrative. I mean, with the exception of GB News and people like yourself, no one else puts out a different narrative.
No, well, no, indeed, and that does actually never cease to amaze me, because when I also read this headline that the UK security agencies have foiled 39 late-stage terror plots since 2018, actually, it is staggering to think about the amount of people that wish us harm, but also the amount of homegrown people who wish us harm. And this is my ongoing concern, which is that we have people who now were not just born and raised here, but their mum and dads were born and raised here as well. So the second generation of people, the people who have grown up and reaped all the benefits of our society, etc., and for some reason want to turn it into essentially an Islamic state. And that is a huge worry.
It is. And I mean, there's some things that could be done far better. And when I was involved as a police and crime commissioner in Surrey, I was kind of banging this drum. We need to find out who is financing the growth in some of the more extremist mosques around the UK, because they're popping up everywhere. And you will probably find they are very often Saudi Arabian businessmen who are behind many of these extremist mosques that are developing, where they then insist to the management committees of the mosques that their own extremist imams must be brought in, who've been taught around madrasas in Lahore in Pakistan and so on, who then literally teach hatred. And there's a fine balance here, but one of them is when we're talking about granting planning permission for a mosque, find out where the money's coming from and make sure the funding is coming from reasonable people. Then we don't get people coming in poisoning the minds of our young British people.
Are you by any chance? I don't know if you are, but it does tie in rather seamlessly with the story we were talking about earlier, if indeed you are, which is London's famous Trocadero is now being turned into a mosque. A billionaire there that has been labelled as Britain's cruelest landlord, anyway, has apparently decided to buy Azif Aziz. He's 56 years old, is a property tycoon known, well, by Mr. West End, is plonking a mosque that can have a capacity for 390 worshippers in the vacant Metro Cinema, right in the slap bang in the middle of Piccadilly Circus and Soho, which, I mean, dare I say, when it comes to Soho, might clash slightly with some of the other clientele that are on offer in Soho there. But, I mean, would you be having a long, hard look at this and whether or not the planning permission there is, for want of a better phrase, kosher?
Well, I would do. I would be looking to see where the funding stream is for that and where Mr. Aziz's links are and so on. He may well be a perfectly reasonable, devout Muslim, which everyone's entitled to be, who wants to do that because he believes that his faith should be more accessible to people. But the issue on it is, where are the imams coming from and what messages are they preaching? Because we have got loads of really good imams in the UK who actually work within the contest strategy or work within our prisons trying to address this extremist jihadist narrative that's being developed at various places around the country.
All right, Kevin, thank you very much. Great stuff. That Kevin Hurley, their former head of counter-terrorism at City of London Police, just reacting to Suella Braverman's new counter-terrorism report.